Members, please note that the projection size is now 1600 by 1200, with 1200 being the maximum height. We're looking at resizing your images, and we're looking to resize them for printing first of all, and then for DPI, which is digitally projected images. We're going to use two programs for this. One is Photoshop CS2, which is about 10 years old now, so any later versions of this program will obviously do what we're going to do, and all of the Photoshop elements should be able to do it as well. The other program we're going to use is Faststone Image Viewer. It's called Image Viewer, but it actually does quite a bit of editing as well as being a good image viewer. Okay, so we're going to jump straight into Photoshop, and we've already got an image opened ready to work on. Now, one of the first things I ask myself when I'm sending something off for a print is, does it need a board run? Well, usually I do put a board run because it gives you a bit of extra meat on the edges when you come to cutting your mount, so you don't have to overlap the mount quite as far. But if you look at this particular image, it won't really matter if the edges of the mount sort of encroached into these edges, because there's no real detail on this. So this image would be fine. However, I'll just close this one down. If we looked at this image of the duck, you can see that the tail's getting very close to this edge, and so in this instance I would definitely want to put a border on it so that we can cut the mount to be just snipping this edge. It's not quite as keen at this side, so if we make a small amount, we can overlap a bit further so that this is just not showing. But you don't want to start cutting off where the duck's tail is there. So, as I said, we're going to look at printing first. And you might say, well, why do we need to mess about like this? Why don't we just send the image off to the printers and we'll get it back? Well, there's various reasons. One of them, not least of all, is the aspect ratio. If you sent off for a 16:12 print, for instance, they might fill it up, and this might start getting cropped off. And if you sent off for an 18:12, it's obviously a different aspect ratio, so different parts of the image will be cropped. So it's your image, so you need to take control of it really, and get it back from the printers exactly as you want it. So in order to resize this for printing, we'll go straight away, we'll go to Image, and then we come to Image Size, and this will bring up the image size document, and you'll notice one of the main things to notice is that this is the resolution. Now when you're printing, it wants to be at least 300 pixels per inch. Some printers will ask for dots per inch. They'll say make it dots. They're still working on dots per inch, and it's the same thing, either dots per inch or pixels per inch. But you want a minimum of 300. You can change it, and some of the professional labs may ask for a higher pixels per inch. They may ask for 400 or 500. The other thing to notice is that we've got constraint proportions clicked, and that locks these two boxes together. So if you change the size of one box, it will automatically change the other. If you don't have that ticked, it can start to distort the image. Now in this instance, I want to send off for a 16:12 print, and we're quite nearly there anyway, so we're not going to be making it that much bigger. But don't forget, I want to put a border around it. So instead of saying 16, I'm going to say 15.5 inches. Oops, too much. 15.5. And because we've got the constraint proportions clicked, this has gone to 11.2. So we've got just slightly less than 16 inches, a quarter of an inch each side, and slightly less than 12. So I can click OK on that, and you'll just see the image just popped up a little bit bigger. If I was setting off with a smaller image, you would see it change quite dramatically, but you don't want to be enlarging too much if you can help it. You don't want to for instance, just cropped a right little bit of that head off and then trying to make it a 16 by 12, because you're going to lose a lot of quality as the computer tries to, as the program tries to enlarge the image. Okay, so as we said, we want to look at a border on this. So the way you do this in Photoshop, we'll go back to image again, and we'll come down, and instead of image size, now we're going to go to canvas size. So we click on that, and it's telling us what the size is. That's the size that we've just made it, 15.5 by 11.29. Now in this box, you don't want to tick the relative. You don't want, if you don't want these two locked, you want them to be free, because we're going to type the size in both boxes. So we want in a 16 by 12 print. So that's the canvas size. And make sure it's on white. You can change it to other colours, but white's a much better background to have for your border, because if it was red, for instance, and your mount was just clipping the edge there, you'd see red more than you will see white. So make sure that the border's on white, then click OK, and this is what you'll get. So this is virtually ready to send off to the printers, and if you ask for a 16 by 12 print, this is how it should come back. If they ask you, do you want a border on, say no, because you've done all the work, and you're going to ask for a straight print, and that's what you're going to get back. And then you only need to cut your mount slightly smaller to get around these edges. Now the other thing I need to mention while we're talking especially about professional labs is quite a few professional labs will ask you to embed their profile, their printer profile, into the image. If you send the image off to somebody like Aldi or Lidl, you'll get some good results. I've had some good results from them, and they won't ask you for a printer profile to be embedded, but most of the professional labs do. And if you were to send the image without their profile embedded, it may not come back looking like it does on the screen. You may get it a bit darker, or some of the colours might not be quite the same. So I'll just quickly run through embedding the profile, and to do this we're going to edit, and you can see down here it says convert to profile, and it brings up this drop down box with all these profiles in. Now these profiles, this is DC Colour Labs, who are in Manchester. When you go onto your professional site, if they want you to do this, then they will supply the profile, and they're free to download, and they usually just plug into Photoshop. These profiles don't work in some of the free programs, some of the cheap or real cheap programs, but they do work in Photoshop and Elements. And as you can see, if there's different profiles for different papers. So if I wanted a glossy paper from DC Colour Labs, I'll just tick on that, and that's what profile is going to be embedded. Also you can see that we've got sRGB, which is the best colour profile for printing as well. So we click OK, and now the profile's embedded. So now we're going to save this file. And what I didn't mention at the beginning, what I should have actually mentioned, was the fact that whatever files you're working on, if you're reducing them, especially if you're reducing them, but either way, when you're changing the sizes, make sure you're working on copies. Don't work on the original, because if something goes wrong, you're going to lose your original if you happen to overtype it or whatever. So always make sure you're working on a copy. So when it comes to saving this, what I would do is come down and save as anyway, which won't overtype, but I'll save as, and it brings up the original title, which is Duck, but I'm going to just type at the back of there 16 by 12 glossy, And now that tells me that I've already resized it for a 16 by 12 and I've already put the profile in for glossy paper. I'll save that now, and Photoshop will ask me if I want to save it at the maximum size, which is exactly what I do want to save at the maximum size. And so we just say OK, and that's saved the file. Another quick point that I didn't mention actually, especially if you're trying to make a file quite a bit bigger, is when you've done your editing on your file, you've changed your colours, maybe you've cropped a bit and lifted the shadows or whatever you've done. Now most digital images benefit from a bit of sharpening, but if you know you're sending it off for a print, don't sharpen it until you get to this stage, because by making the print bigger, the image bigger, it can start to soften it slightly, and you may need to go back and sharpen. If you've already sharpened once before, then you're sharpening on sharpening, and that can cause what's called artifacts, and it can have an adverse effect on your image. So always leave the sharpening until the end of the process. Okay, I'm going to drop this one off, and we're going to look at DPI. I'll just open recent Bluebell. We'll do the DPI on the Bluebell that we had earlier. Now DPI is quite a bit easier to do actually than the prints, because you're just making it smaller. You're not messing about with borders and things. But it's basically the same procedure. But the DPI, the important thing with the DPI is make sure you are working on a copy, because you're going to really reduce this file quite a bit, and then if in a few months time, if that's the only one you've got, you come to want to print it, then you're going to be struggling, because you've thrown a lot of pixels away in order to resize for the DPI. Okay, so once again we come to image, and we come to image size. Now what we're going to work on now is the pixels. We're not going to work on the document size with regards inches and resolution. Don't worry about the resolution for DPI. As long as it's over 70, it's fine. The projector and your screens take care of the resolution. It's really irrelevant when we're talking about projected images. So for our competitions, as you'll know if you read it on the competitions pages, the maximum height of any image is 1050 pixels, and the maximum width is 1400. So because this is a portrait image, I'm going to put 1050 straight in, and because these are locked, because of this constraint proportion, it's changed the width to 722, which is obviously less than 1400, but it was going to be less than 1400 because this can only be 1050. So and if you look at what's happened to the print size as we've changed these pixels, you'll see that it's only like a 3" by 4" print now, and this is the reason you must be working on a copy, otherwise you could end up with an image file that can only print 3 inches, and you might want to print it at 12 inches or something. So once again we just click OK, and you'll see how small the image has gone. But when we zoom in on it, it still looks fine on the screen, and it will look fine projected. So the only thing to do with this one now is to go to File again and Save As again. And this file's called Bluebell Woods. And what I'm going to do with this is put DPI. So I know that this one's been resized for DPI. And I'll save it. And again it'll ask me, and I'll save it at the maximum quality. Okay, so if we were to open now my pictures folder in Windows, we'll see all of these now. Okay, so we're in the Windows folder now, and you can see the original shot, and if you just hover your mouse over it, you'll see that the dimensions were 2882 by 4194, and the one that we just resized as a DPI, you can see that height is 1050, and also you can see the duck one that I've called glossy, so we know which one. We know that this one we'd be emailing in for a competition, and we know that this one we will be sending it off to the printers. Okay, so now we're going to have a look at how to resize, and this time in Faststone. Now I've opened Faststone window up, and we've got our two images there. Now, depending how you got Faststone set up, this is the sort of thing you'll probably see. And we can, if we look at effects there, you'll see you've got a border effect. That's what we're going to be using. And also, if you go up into edit, you'll see resize and resample. So you can use any of these drop downs to find out what you want to do. But because I use Faststone as my main viewer, if I just double click, for instance, on the bluebell, then I've got the screen filled with the image, and all I need to do is move the mouse right across to this left hand side, and it brings up the toolbar, and you can see resize there, and you can also see border, which is what we're going to be using. Because in Faststone, if you want to put a border around it, you need to do that first before you resize. So we'll come across, and you just click on border effects, and then you want the width. You'll see all these frames. You only need one frame around it, but you can, in Faststone, you can put a thin black frame and a thick white frame and overlap them and that. But we're just using frame 1, and I'd go to about 60. This is the width of the frame. It depends on the size of your image. You can come back out again and change it, but for now I'm just going to say OK at that, and it's put a border around it. And so now if we wanted to send this off for printing, we can resize it to what we want. And if I come across, you'll see the resize resample button, so we'll click that, and you can see the different boxes, and this one says print size, and that's what we're going to look at, print size. And I'm wanting a print size of 16 high by 12 wide, so I'm going to go change that to 16, and it's not quite hitting 12, but it doesn't matter because you can cut your mount to suit. And also you'll notice the DPI was 240, so I've changed it to the dots per inch. I've changed it to 300, and so that should be fine for most printers. They'll tell you if it's not, and you can, although you've got these drop down sizes, you can actually type whatever size you want in there. And again, we've got preserve aspect ratio ticked. I'll just click it, and that's it. That's done in Faststone for printing. Now when you try to move away from this image in Faststone, it will ask you if you want to save it. This is to save over typing it, and it says, do you want to save the changes you've made? Yes. And so I want to give it a new name, obviously, otherwise it's going to overtype the original. So I'm going to call it Bluebell Wood 16 by 12, and so I know that size for printing. And likewise, if we've got the duck and we just want it to make a digitally projected image, we'll come across, resize, and now this we're going to try typing in here 1400 because it's a landscape type shot, and 1400 is the maximum, and it's automatically again changed the height. Now it's 1020, which is good because it's less than 1050. If for any reason, because of the way it was cropped, that came out at say 1090, then you would need to change the height instead of the width. So you'd overtype that to be 1050, and that would automatically change this. But in this instance, 1400 wide is given as 1020 high, and that's fine. So we just click OK again, and once again it's saved it. It'll ask us if we want to save it. We'll say yes, and I'm going to say duck DPI digitally projected, and that's saved it. And if we go into Windows, we'll see the same as we saw when we'd done it in Photoshop. And so as we jump into Windows, we can see that the blue ball one is, let's just make them a bit bigger, these pictures. We can see the blue ball one is 16x12, ready for printing, and this time we've made the duck the DPI one, and that, as you hover your mouse across it, you'll see that it says 1400 by 1020, whereas the original was 4400. So quite simple to do it in Faststone actually, but as I said earlier, you've not got the facility for your prints to be able to put the printer's profile into the image. But certainly for reducing for the projected images, it's quite quick. I think it's probably quicker than Photoshop. Okay, so that ends today's tutorial, and if there's any problems, just see us at the club.